there are growing safety and security questions following Friday's deadly tragedy at the Astroworld Music Festival. At least 8 people were killed and dozens of others were hurt as the massive crowd surged toward the stage in Houston. Lilia Luciano takes a closer look.
Cell phone video shows a panicked festival goer at Friday night's Astroworld concert pleading for help from a camera operator, but the show would go on. Authorities say when Scott took the stage at approximately 9 p.m., the crowd of more than 50,000 rushed forward. People began passing out in the crush. Video shows first responders treating the injured, but authorities say they were overwhelmed. By the end of the night, at least 8 people would die, with more than a dozen hospitalized and scores injured as the crowd surge spun out of control. Kayla J. was there and says she tried to shield a man who had fallen to the ground, but she now fears he's among the dead.
I just held his hand until he let go.
Roughly half an hour after the show started, it was declared a mass casualty event. Many in the crowd called for help. In the front, members of the audience tried to get Scott's attention. Others tried to escape the nightmare, hauling each other over metal barricades.
We need somebody to help him. Somebody passed out right here.
Later on, Scott stopped his set to help someone in the crowd, but started again soon after. His show didn't end until about 10:10 p.m., almost 40 minutes after the mass casualty event had been declared. On Saturday, Houston Chief of Police Troy Finner defended the decision.
We have to worry about riots. There was a cooperation and discussion between promoters, our fire department, the police department.
Scott posted this video on Instagram the next day saying he was unaware of the severity of the situation in the crowd.
I'm honestly just devastated, and I could never imagine anything like this just happening.
But some survivors say authorities did not do enough, like Basil Baig. He was at the festival with his brother Danish, who was killed in the crowd.
I saw my brother getting resuscitated. I tried to find him. He got lost. He got lost in the crew. I looked over my shoulder. He was there 1 second. And he did not deserve this. He did not deserve this. He did not deserve this. Okay?
Boy, that is heartbreaking. Lilia is with us now from Houston to talk more about what we've learned so far about this incident. So, Lilia, we have heard 8 people deceased, but we know there are a number of people who were taken to the hospital, and we talked earlier, you said even more people had been actually injured at the event. What can you tell us about the victims?
That's right, Anne-Marie. You know, what we know is that they were very young. They ranged in age from 14 years old. John Hilgert was a high school student. His coach had very emotional words to say about him in a statement. His high school sent out a letter acknowledging and confirming that he was among the dead, 14 years old. We know also a young girl that's 16 years old in high school, Brianna Rodriguez, was also reportedly among the dead. We've seen multiple posts, and many of these flowers and cards with her name on it. There were 2 friends from Chicago, Franco Patino and Jacob Jurnik, in their early 20s, 21 years old, around 20 and 21. And we heard from Danish Baig's brother in the story. And the last victim to be confirmed was Axel Acosta. He was 21 years old, had traveled by himself from Washington State, and of course went to the concert by himself. I just get chills reading the accounts from their friends and their family. There was also Rudy Peña, was 23 years old. I talked to one of his friends yesterday who came here to bring flowers. She was, of course, very emotional. She was at the concert and told me that she had seen him just about 10 minutes before Scott Travis played. She was able to say hi, and that was the last time she saw her friend. She told me that for her it was very difficult. It was, impossible to imagine what he went through because she herself wasn't sure she was going to make it. So to think about those last moments of her friend's life has been incredibly traumatic. I also talked to one person who thought that she was with a man. She can't tell who it is. She's not sure, but she says he looks like at least two of the victims moments before she believed he died. She doesn't know. But just like her, a lot of the people there were trying to help those victims and don't know the outcome. And a lot of them are completely traumatized by the experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine, Lilia, because it is not common to have something like this happen. What are some of the people saying about the crowd surge? You know, the moments leading up to when people started to actually lose their lives, because it seemed at one point that there was an understanding from the stage that there was something going on, but then the concert continued on for the totality of the set.
That has been the frustration that people have expressed is related to that. The fact that people had started losing consciousness, passing out much earlier, before Travis Scott started playing. I talked to several people who said, look, I saw people on the ground being treated before he even started singing. And he sang for about 40 minutes, 37 minutes since this was declared a mass casualty event. So there's a great deal of frustration with what was going on. What it is it was 50,000 people. What I've heard from witnesses is that the moment Travis Scott is announced, there was a counter counting down the minutes to when he came on stage. Of course, he is the superstar who's a founder of this event and who people came to see from all across the country. So when he begins singing or when he's about to start, people, just 50,000 strong energy, rush towards the crowd. You know, we know in the past that Travis Scott has pled guilty to charges that are related to inciting disorderly conduct among the crowd, including, telling people to overpower or overcome the security. So people already were in this mindset. By this time, they've been, waiting to see their favorite artist or star. His shows are high energy. And so the moment he goes on stage, people just kind of lose it. What I've heard from witnesses is, some people were trying to protect people losing consciousness. They themselves were feeling suffocated. I heard, kids telling me about how people would step on their feet and then push them. So it's this mosh pit kind of energy and action and mentality, right side by side, juxtaposed to the people who needed urgent medical assistance. So a great deal of commotion. We saw people trying to go on stage and alert the promoters and the producers and the artists themselves to stop, and yet it took a very long time by a lot of people's accounts to finally end it.
So, Vlad was just saying that clearly that from stage, at one point, Travis Scott could see that someone had passed out, but it's very difficult to see exactly what's going on in the audience when you're on stage. However, Travis Scott, Drake, and Live Nation, they're all facing lawsuits. What exactly are they being sued for?
Well, the headline is negligence. I have read several lawsuits this morning. They've come from people who were injured. They've come from attendees. They've come from people who died. Axel Acosta's family is among those suing. So in one of the lawsuits is coming from very famous civil rights attorney Ben Crump from Benjamin Crump's firm. So multiple lawsuits at this point, and what they claim is negligence. It was, they raised questions about what we saw during the day leading up to that night. I mean, people just rushing through barricades. They're talking about improper or inadequate security, just overseeing all of the risks and the threats, and the fact that they're suing Travis Scott, Drake, Live Nation, everybody in charge perhaps was negligent in really assessing the level of danger that these concert goers were in.
Lilia, I think we were just showing some video where it looks like people were kind of like rushing through barricades. I know I had read that at one point people sort of rushed past a VIP barricade. But still, in terms of the number of people in the venue, there was more than enough room to hold the number of people there.
That's right. I mean, the venue has a capacity, according to authorities, of 200,000 people, and they capped it at 50,000. Even if people, broke in, you're not going to reach the amount of people who can fit there. There's also, there's videos going around about the way this show was promoted. They used videos from 2019 showing people breaking through barricades and security checkpoints. So it's part of the encouragement, and I'm sure all of that is going to be looked at in these lawsuits by attorneys and, of course, by police who are investigating this as well as a criminal incident.
Lilia, and we know that Mr. Scott has also put out a video on Instagram where he expressed his shock at what happened and heartfelt condolences to the family members of those who lost their lives. We've seen this happen before, most famously back in 1969, a Rolling Stones concert in Altamont where a young man, Meredith Hunter, was killed. And it changed the Rolling Stones, the way that they were as a band for many, many years. When somebody loses a life at a concert, when you're trying to, basically perform to make people happy, to have something like this happen is devastating, not just to the family members, but to the organization, the band in this case, that put it together. So we'll see. The investigation is still ongoing, and we'll see what it brings. Lilia Luciano on the ground for us. Thank you, as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Vlad.